Hello and welcome to the Couch & Associates Ask the Experts webinar series. This is the first episode of the series and it'll be on Marketo. My name is James Ellis and I'm the marketing coordinator here at Couch & Associates. We are a marketing technology company based in Toronto with offices in the US and the UK, and we provide services to digitally empower firms. Today I'm joined by three of our Marketo experts. We have Dan Haidt and Jonathan Al, two of our senior marketing consultants, and Ebrar Ali, our senior technology manager. Could the three of you please introduce yourselves to the audience? Let's start with you, Dan.
Thanks, James. Great to be here. As mentioned, my name is Daniel Haidt. I'm a senior marketing consultant here at Couch. My specialties are system implementations, migrations, system audits, and creating roadmaps using a value-driven approach. It's great to be here. John, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Yeah, happy to be here as well. I've been with Couch & Associates now for, over 7 years, and in the industry much longer than that, just helping our clients get the most out of their technology investment and helping them to introduce and maximize processes within their organizations.
Thanks, John.
Over to you, Ebrar.
Yeah, I'll take it from here. Happy to be here, guys. My name is Ebrar Ali, and as James mentioned, I'm the Senior Technology Manager here at Couch & Associates. Been with the company for, I believe, more than 6 years now. And a big part of my responsibility is to be able to support our marketing consultants, like people like John and Dan, and to be able to provide essentially connections between platforms that normally would not have any native connections. So a lot of my work revolves around API development, passing data back and forth, systems design documentations, essentially mapping out downstream and upstream processes to ensure that data is flowing back and forth between your pipelines as efficiently as possible.
All right, thanks for that. Good for the audience to know a little bit more about you. And then over the past week, we've been receiving questions related to Marketo. So let's get into those. Question one is, what is the best way to ensure security with teams working remotely?
This is a good one, James. I'll take it, at least kick it off. And this is a really timely question, especially with what's going on with COVID-19. A lot more people working from home and remotely. So make sure that people are accessing your platform securely is obviously a key concern that many of our clients have. And probably one of the most common ways that people do this is IP whitelisting. And this is a way that you can just specify specific IPs that are able to access your Marketo platform. And this is something that works for a lot of our clients. Now, one of the key considerations here is, with people working from home, you've got different resident IPs. So you've got to have an admin that's managing and adding these IPs to the Marketo instance as needed. Another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of internet providers will cycle IP addresses. So this is something that needs to be maintained. One of the other ways, or one of the things to call out is to get around some of the maintenance that people sometimes do is introduce IP ranges, but that can also then start to limit some of the security. But IP whitelisting is definitely a good way to go.
And just to add to that, John, there's two aspects to being able to provide secure access to an office network. One of them, as John mentioned, is IP whitelisting, which essentially restricts access to the system. But then the most important thing is to be able to ensure that when you're actually interacting with any of your like your Marketo instance, for example, you're sitting on a VPN, because a VPN, just for everybody's knowledge, is a virtual private network, and the purpose of a VPN is to be able to ensure that any data being passed back and forth between you and Marketo is essentially encrypted. So to give an example, even if a person were to be able to hack that transmission, because the data would be encrypted, it would be of no use to you. So VPNs are essentially the best way to go. And add to that IP whitelisting, I think you've got a pretty secure system, and you can work from any remote location around the world.
Also, I can call out some additional settings in terms of Marketo. At the individual user setting, some things that I'd recommend implementing in this case would be enabling password expiry as a default. This should always be enabled for your users, in particular when it's coming to your contractors. Another item would be decreasing the default inactivity session timeout. What that means is, I believe the default in Marketo is a 4-hour window in which somebody can continue working within the instance. If you reduce that time frame, you're essentially enforcing their need to log back in after a period of inactivity, which is another way to increase security, especially with people working at home. Maybe they're working more places than usual. So a last item I'd like to say would be increasing password complexity requirements as well. By doing so, you'll be able to prevent some of the all-time favorite passwords, like that password 123 we all know so well.
James, before we move on to the next question, just want to add to that as well. Something that I see a lot across some of our enterprise clients is the implementation of SSO, and Marketo fully supports this across a number of different SSO providers. But say SSO, basically single sign-on, allows people to manage their logins for a number of different systems through a single platform. This is another great way that people can add that layer of security that is desired with remote working. One of the other key benefits here that I'll call out with rolling out an SSO implementation is the fact that when somebody does leave the organization or you turn over, there's only one spot that you need to deactivate that user and they lose access to all systems. So just wanted to end with that.
Great, thanks, John. I think between the three of you, that was answered quite comprehensively. Let's get on to question 2. So someone wrote into us saying they have plans to add to their Marketo team. Can we provide some recommendations to ensure that their marketing automation practices scale effectively? They say they already have issues with a cluttered instance. So can you provide some recommendations around that?
Yeah, James, I'll jump in on this one first, guys. I find that it doesn't take long without the right measures in place for any marketing automation platform to get disorganized, a little out of control. And so whether we're doing a new implementation of a Marketo environment or we're coming in and helping people better organize, one of the foundation pieces is setting up a really good foldering structure. And alongside that is a naming convention. And so I'll start with foldering structures. This is a case where in our instance, for example, we have our different assets broken up across different types of data management, lead management, marketing campaigns, and templates. And the foldering structure really allows us then to keep all of our different assets organized. The other key thing in and around the foldering that a lot of times people don't think of is separating it out between active and inactive. And this is something where you can make sure that you can easily identify which programs are in an active status versus inactive, and you don't have to get bogged down going through everything if you're looking for certain active programs. And of course, that feeds into nicely into naming conventions. And so your folder should have naming conventions, but then also every asset that you bring into or you create within your Marketo environment, you want to adhere to a naming convention so that things are really easy to find and search for. And so this is where you can do this in something like Excel sheet. Also naming convention calculators that are built out in HTML that are forms that people can go in and basically select from drop downs and generate a name for their asset depending on what it is that they're doing. And typically in a naming convention, you would want to be able to specify things like the program or the asset, depending if you're a global organization, the region, the date, the type, the name, and these are all the kinds of different inputs that have into a naming convention calculator. One of the things to call it here as well is that typically you would use acronyms or short forms for things so that your name doesn't get too unwieldy or too long. And especially if you're syncing between systems, some of them have limitations on what the length of a name can be. And so just something to keep in mind there as well.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I've actually got something else to add to this, and in specific to the question around maintaining consistency, something that we have seen be of tremendous value to some of our clients was the idea of maintaining a template library, which is essentially a collection of programs and campaigns for marketers to use while they're working within their instance. It's really establishing a process where they are only using these pre-approved templates, which ensures that they are following tight quality control and enforcing that consistency. Without something like this in place, it's not uncommon to have seen marketers cloning a previous version of those programs, to create the next iteration. And that what that's going to lead to is quality control issues as small things start to change. These problems creep in and build over time due to a bit of a snowball effect. So really the leveraging of a template library has been very valuable to some of our clients in ensuring clean scalability. And another practice that's very related, also very valuable and goes hand in hand here, it's the creation of a marketing playbook. And what that is, essentially, it's a play-by-play, a how-to guide for marketers outlining the templates available to them, their intended use, and exactly how they leverage and modify those. Again, this further ensures that consistency and quality control. And as a added side bonus, it reduces onboarding time and learning curve for new team members, as there's a clear documentation in place to show them how it is to get things done in a cleanly and scalable way.
And just to add to that, Dan, with all the, with the marketing playbook, another really important piece of documentation that we sometimes, can overlook is system documentation, and having a very updated system documentation set because there's a couple of things that you get from that. First one is that it also allows you to map out and understand what your Marketo system looks like in terms of how data objects are essentially interacting with each other. So it gives you that understanding. So if you do want to make changes, then you know exactly what's already in place, and then it reduces the time to deploy more changes. B, if you're onboarding somebody, if a new user comes into play, what you can essentially do is, because you already have everything mapped out correctly, it's easy to pass that on. So if somebody onboarding, or even if somebody does leave the company and you hire a new systems administrator for Marketo, it'll be easy for that person to be able to pick up from where the other person left off. And another last piece that I want to mention is around maintaining a strict change log. So by change log, what I'm referring to is basically maintaining a document list that essentially lets you know what changes were made and when they were made. So what that means is that if there's anything that breaks, or if something goes wrong, then you can go back and you can say, all right, we made this change on this date and this impacted these things, and then you can easily roll back if you need to. So.
All right, thanks, Abrar. I think that one could be quite useful for much of our audience trying to gain some consistency in their systems. Let's move on to question 3, which is, how can I minimize the slowdown I'm experiencing in my instance?
I'm happy to take the lead on this one, guys. It's a great question, something I've definitely experienced with my clients before. And the good news, it's something that's easily addressable, taking a little bit more of a strategic approach to the way you're setting things up in your instance. In my experience, one of the biggest factors to slow down, it's campaigns, and in particular triggered campaigns. So by nature, these triggered campaigns are always on. They're always listening for particular activities to occur. And the problem occurs when the same activity is being used to trigger multiple programs simultaneously. It creates a backlog in the queue and slows down processing times. easy solutions to address this issue. Reducing the number of programs with a specific trigger. So instead of, for example, creating 20 disparate programs that fire whenever a lead is created, I create something called a lead triage program or a triage program. So in this example, anytime a new lead would be created, they would all be funneled into one program. And that program can then make decisions on what further processing needs to be taken place at that time. And it can run them through those next line items in a sequential fashion. Really just trying to avoid that everything all at once approach. And a secondary to that is reducing the number of triggered campaigns. For campaigns that don't need to happen immediately, things that are less time sensitive, they can be batched to run during slower times of the day, overnight, or staggered throughout the day to try and reduce the level of system workload at one time. And I guess triggered campaigns, yes, the architecture too of campaigns in general, there's a few quick comments. There's always a desire to over-engineer and over-design some of these things. Just trying to take the most simplistic approach can often help reduce some of this workload. So, like I said earlier, combining disparate programs or avoiding unnecessary processes, potentially tightening program membership. By that, I mean only processing records that need to be processed. And finally, kind of alluding back to what John was talking about with foldering, ensuring that programs that are no longer running or need to run are archived and disabled. Not only does that free up some processing power, but it mitigates the risk of running contacts through programs that should no longer be active.
Great answer, Jen. Kind of in the same vein, I'd like to add in regards to processing and having Marketo doing processing unnecessarily. Smart lists can be a big contributing factor to bogging down the system. And so I think any time that you can take these complex smart lists and simplify them, it can go a long way in terms of reducing some of that processing. And one of the key things there is, or one of the things people may see when they're running some of these really complex smart lists is errors or timeouts, which is an indication too of some of the resources that are going into these smart lists or pulling these smart lists. But one of the other things I wanted to call out too is that, a lot of times you'll build one smart list and then you want to reference it in another one, and so you end up nesting multiple smart lists within each other, and that can actually drive some inefficiencies in the way that Marketo processes those lists. And so we'd recommend, where possible, to actually redefine the criteria in your smart list so that you're not referencing and nesting that complexity. And this is a case where, be smart in the way that you are building your lists. Don't try and add too much complexity. Work smarter, not harder, and trying to help Marketo by applying the logic to your smart lists as well.
And just to kind of wrap that up, one of the biggest aspects of CRM slowdown is your database size, understandably. And from a database perspective, there's two things that you need to look at. First is the size, so the number of records that you have in your system. And one way to mitigate that risk, or to essentially not have that impact you, is to run scheduled cleansing of your database. So to understand that if there's records that don't need to be in there, you can archive them. By archiving, you've got a couple of options there. What we've seen mostly is the fact that if you are maintaining a data warehouse on an external system, it's a good idea to regularly pull data from Marketo that doesn't need to be there or doesn't need to be actioned in Marketo anymore, and push it into your warehouse. You can achieve this via a number of different ways, predominantly using the API. And then the second, and which in my opinion is a little bit more important, is the structure of a database. So having a large number of fields, which means having a large number of data points that describe your individual contacts, can can be like the biggest contributor to system slowdown. And the best way to go around that, and what we recommend, is to essentially audit your field list and make sure that, you know, if you're collecting data points that are not required anymore, or, you know, don't have any updated values, it's probably best to essentially, you know, regularly clean that up. It's like what we call it internally is a kill and keep audit list is what we call it. And there's a couple of ways that you can essentially, you know, create tools using the Marketo API to be able to run those kinds of audits.
All right, well, thanks to the three of you for teaming up to answer those questions. That's all we have for today. If you did send us a question that we haven't got to, we will be in touch shortly. And if you'd still like to send us a question, then please do so. Thanks to our three experts, Dan, John, and Abrar. And thanks to you for joining us. We will be making this available on demand for you to go and revisit. And keep an eye out for the next episode in our Ask the Experts webinar series. Have a great day.